Slovenian guitarist Samo Salamon sent me a couple of recordings last year. They were both duets recorded COVID style with each person playing separately. And both made together one of my record picks. Then I discovered his YouTube channel where he interviews an amazing number of musicians over the last year. A lot of guitarists, but also pianists, drummers, and famous names and less famous names alike. We discuss how he makes me feel like a slacker because he did almost, I think, close to 200 last year. And we talk about why jazz guitar players end up playing Telecasters and also the process of interviewing people. It turned into a good talk, and I hope you all enjoy it. I hope you're all staying safe out there. Please check out my sponsors, Earthquaker Devices and Red Panda, and sit back and enjoy the Samo Salamon interview. So first, how do you pronounce your name?
Samo.
Samo Salamon?
Samo Salamon, yeah.
Okay. And where are you located?
I'm in Slovenia now, Maribor.
Okay. And you grew up there, I assume.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
have you always been there? Because well, first of all, being an American, my geography, of course, is terrible. So where exactly is Slovenia?
Well, that's like, you know where Venice is, right?
Venice, Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm 3 hours east of Venice and 2 hours south of Vienna.
Okay.
So that you kind of got or like 3 hours west of Budapest. So kind of this.
Okay. I mean, I could look it up on the map, but I was just curious. And you grew up there, I assume.
Yeah. I mean, I went to the States for quite a lot actually, to New York, but yeah, basically I've been here more or less. So.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that. So, well, first, growing up in Slovenia, what kind of access did you have to jazz and guitar and gear and all that kind of stuff?
Man, we were still part of Yugoslavia. That's like early 90s. In 91 we got independent. So when I kind of bought my first electric guitar, we didn't have all these online, of course, shops to buy. And so even in Yugoslavia, you could go to a store and there was like 6 electric guitars there. So, the quality was not the best, but yeah, it was not so much access. Nowadays it's so easier. But, when a friend bought a CD of, I don't know, whoever, or Nat Coleman, or of, John McLaughlin, you kind of got it and you ripped it, burned the CD, because that was the last time probably for a long time you had access to that CD. So that's how at least I got exposed to music, or still cassettes, and, listen to radio shows on national radio, jazz, and recorded so that you could listen when they presented albums. So that was kind of not so easily accessible, actually. Yeah.
Well, your interview show is called Dr. Jazz. So did you study jazz? Do you have a doctorate in music?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't study jazz, but I have a doctorate in translation and American poetry. So I did a PhD. I first did an MA and a master's in translation, and then I did a PhD in American poetry, American literature, and translation. So.
Wow. So what was your music education? Was that all self-taught or?
Yeah, I mean, no, I did like 6 years of classical guitar, and then that was the only chance we had here in Slovenia back then. So there was no, private schools or even private tutors. Not really many jazz guitarists here. So back then, and yeah, so then I slowly, got involved into jazz by listening, and the guitar teacher gave me just LPs, to listen to, like, I don't know, Ralph Downer and John Abercrombie and Pat Metheny. And then I was like, man, I need to learn this, how do I do that? And yeah, then I just started listening and transcribing the stuff, and slowly then I got a teacher in Italy, in Trieste, and I drove there twice a month, and yeah, and then one thing led to another. I started to figure out more. I met Italian musicians and started to play more, and through time I got it figured out somehow, I think so.
Well, yeah, and it seems, I mean, from watching your interviews, and I'll put it in the introduction and all that stuff. But I mean, you have an amazing interview channel, and you talk to a lot of jazz musicians, and you obviously have a real knowledge of the history of traditional jazz. You know that, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a even now, I read, the Penguin Guide to Jazz. The I think I have all the editions, and I'm just like a jazz geek. That's why I like doing these interviews. I just love reading. Who was on a Paul Chambers album? I don't know, or who did, I don't know, whoever Jimmy Bruno play in 1992, or James Genos or Jeff Dane Watts or whoever, Michael Carvin, or I just love reading this stuff. So when I do these interviews, I'm like a small kid, like people telling what they did in 1964, and I'm just like, man, that's what jazz is all about. Also, I think this heritage and history, I think that's so important. So
yeah, well, it's interesting. It is, and it's interesting. So when you started reading about it, I mean, was that at the time when you could finally get to listen to all those old records on Spotify or
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that?
I mean, I got really interested in the history already when I was 22 or something, or 20, and reading interviews, and I subscribed to Downbeat when it was possible to Slovenia. So a couple of years, I couldn't wait to get a copy. Every, I don't know when it was, 10th day of the month, and then you start discovering stuff, and bought encyclopedias, started reading, started investigating this stuff. So, and now it's still this spirit, I still have this curiosity of learning about things. I did just like an interview the other day with Doug Hammond, the drummer who played with James Blood Almer and Charles Mingus, and and then he started telling me a story like how he played a gig in Village Gate with Sonny Rollins, and there's Miles Davis that they're in a booth, and I'm just like, I just imagine this stuff, how it must have been, like 1967, and this scene there, it's amazing, I guess.
Oh, they're great stories. I mean, it's like the Bobby Broom interview where he's talking about, playing in
Oh
benches
man,
in the audience and stuff. Actually, I interviewed him for Guitar Player, and he told me that
I
story
mean,
about the club where the owner didn't want to let him on stage and all that. Yeah, the story. I mean, jazz, of course, is a lot of it is about the stories,
yeah.
and stories are amazing. But what I was curious about, I mean, you can learn all about that kind of stuff from reading, but at what point were you able to access the records and the music?
That's, yeah. I mean, shit. Timeline wise, it's hard to say. I think in the 90s, I was still, when CDs came out. I went to a record store here, which mostly had, the pop stuff and rock stuff, of course. And then, usually they had jazz records, and I started discovering. So that was mid 90s. If a Ralph Towner record came out, I bought it, and whatever jazz was there, I just bought it, especially guitars, because John Abercrombie, all these cats, like whenever I saw a name that was familiar, I was like, oh man, I need this, even if I didn't know a guitarist. I was just like, if I recognized one of the players, then I just took a CD. And many times these CDs were then on sale, of course, because they were in the store for 1 year, no one bought it, and I was like, okay, thank you. So,
Right. Yeah, well, most of my record collection for most of my life has been either used or bargain
yeah,
records or CDs. That's the advantage of not having popular, quote unquote, popular taste.
exactly,
Um,
yeah.
so you have studied this history, and you're obviously aware of it. So at what point did you get into more modern sounds like the aton, more atonal stuff and noise and just the a more modern, you know,
Yeah,
20, 20th, late 20th century sound?
I mean, guitar wise, it was quite early when I was like 18. I was accepted at the jazz university actually, but I studied languages here at university, and the first lesson with that at university in Austria was like, the guy gave me like Joe Pass etudes, And I did that stuff. I transcribed lots of Herb Ellis and Joe Pass and all these guys. And I asked him like, well, it's nice, but I really want to learn what Eric Dolphy plays and Ornette Coleman and these guys. And he was like, no, 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 like really conservative. And then I just started transcribing, like, Ornette. I transcribed like, I don't know, 50 solos and heads of Ornette. Basically the entire complete Atlantic recordings, the 6 CD box set. And if that's modern, I mean, yeah, it is in a way. But then, then I started discovering all the things that were happening, like Sonny Sharrock and 80s Ornette, like James Blood Ulmer and Arthur Blythe. Then I fell into Frisell. That completely blew my mind. Still now, when I hear Bill, it's like, he's the hero for me. And, John Abercrombie. Then I had a huge John Scofield phase, of course, especially the quartet with Joe Lovano. I transcribed all that stuff. And, then came all these, especially saxophonists. I think I listened to a lot of saxophone and piano. Andrew Hill, I love Andrew Hill. And Paul Motion, and then slowly going into free stuff. Derek Bailey, the British scene, Barry Guy, all these amazing players, even guys my age, Mary Halvorson, and everyone. I just started to check out what was happening, since when the digital streaming was possible, then it was very easy to, still nowadays it is, to follow what's happening. So
yeah, now everything. I mean, just before we started, I was watching. Somebody just put up 4 days ago, Bill and Julian Lage doing duets in Massachusetts. Have you seen that? It,
yeah,
it's
man.
man.
Yeah,
When they're doing "So Lonesome I Could Cry" and Julian comes in with that harmonization, it's like, what? What is
yeah.
that? It's like it's so different from the way Bill would play it, but it's so fresh and so modern. And
He's really good. I mean, I saw Julian like 3 years ago in Vienna with Charles Lloyd. And it was just, whenever he played a solo, the crowd was like,
yeah, yeah.
he's
Well,
so
'cause
good.
he's that amazing combination of musicality and monstrous technique.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's got the crowd pleasing chops and stuff like that. But if you're a musician and you have taste,
yeah,
it's still, you realize how amazingly tasteful. And I mean, it's fascinating to watch him change because, when I first started listening to him, he was brilliant, and he had kind of the roots thing, and still even early on, because I know he studied with a guy I know in San Francisco. He studied blues early on, and he knows all that stuff. But it was interesting when he moved to New York to see how his
yeah.
sound changed, and he got a little more out and more adventurous and stuff
I
like.
love that. Yes. Also composition wise, I mean, he grew a lot.
Yeah. So,
That's
I mean, that's
incredible.
why I'm curious. I mean, obviously you were absorbing it all, and it was fascinating. I mean, you have a huge recorded output,
Yeah,
um, for one so young. And let's start sifting through it. It was fascinating to listen to your style shift, as
yeah.
you went along. But back in, on what, ornithology, that
Mhm.
record, yeah, were you still using that Ibanez archtop that I see you playing? Because you're getting some funky sounds out of it, and just some distortion. So were you stuffing it with anything? Because it's a full hollow arch.
Yeah, no, I just I've been using this rat distortion pedal from 1982, and somehow it always worked with this guitar, with this AF 200, the Ibanez, and it just worked. I don't know, to avoid also. I love distortion because of the legato. I love cornet and saxophone, and I wanted to get this legato-ish sound, and the distortion, I think, really helps with this. And I never got feedback. So yeah, a friend of mine had a Benson, the Ibanez one, and he had to stuff it with foam and everything just to get this, the feedback out of it. But this one, somehow it works still. So
I think that's an in some ways that's an advantage of cheaper guitars, because the more expensive ones, they feel they have to make them resonate, so much.
yeah,
Whereas the
Yeah,
cheaper ones, they can make them out of plywood. They don't care if they resonate. I mean,
yeah,
they can't afford to make them like that. And then when you electrify them, then that becomes not an issue. So that worked out well. But I have to also say, does your girlfriend know you play free jazz? Is one of the best titles I've ever heard. Uh, so
that's what the saxophone player asked me actually on that session. He was like, Samo, does your girlfriend know you play free jazz? I'm like, really? That's a title, So.
that is the title. Well, yeah, there's a Terry Ripdahl title, something about a hot woman or something. That's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
very funny, also. Um, so, over the course of your discography, it seems you play a lot. You play with both European musicians, but you also have the cream of the crop of like downtown New York
Mhm.
jazz players on a lot of it. Was that from when you were? How long did you live in New York? Was that from that era that you made those connections?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time I went was in 1999, and I lived actually with Schofield for 2 months with John, and I took lessons with him, and so that was the first time I went, and but I really sucked back then, so I never didn't make any connections with musicians I played later, and
But wait,
but then I went.
how did living with John Schofield, and you mean in upstate New York?
Yeah, in Katona. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and how did that happen?
Well, to make the long story short, I met him in 1996 and or 95 even, and I made his first web page in the world as a fan, and then his wife Susan contacted me that if I want to do like this professionally. That's when the first web pages came out, and I was like, man, I'm 17. I don't think I'm ready to do this for John Schofield. But and then we met and kept in touch, and I told him I play guitar and start with jazz, and then he said like, well, you should come over. And then I actually did that, and I stayed with him, and we drove together to New York. I went to his concerts, and we did lessons in his basement and played every day. And that influenced me really motivationally because just to see him there and to play with him every day 1 hour, Stella by Starlight or whatever, or Tenor Madness or blues, and yeah, so that was we still are friends, so are still in touch. And
He's a great guy. I mean, I had an
oh, he's
opportunity to
amazing.
hang out with him a couple of times through a mutual friend, and I interviewed him.
Amazing guy.
Last time I interviewed him, we just basically were on the phone after the interview talking about all the bands we saw because we're so old. We're roughly the same age. All the bands we saw in the '60s, the late '60s and early '70s. Um, so okay, that answers that question.
Yeah.
So when did you get back to New York?
Well, then after 2000 and well, then I did my doctor studies partially also in New York for some study scholarship I got. But I don't know, music-wise, I did a tour with David Binney, the saxophone
Sure.
player. I invited him to Europe in 2004 or three, and then I went 2004 for the first time. I babysitted David's cat in his apartment in Manhattan, and I did 2 records there, the Fresh Sounds records with all those guys, Mark Elias and Tony Malaby and Tom Rainey and David Binney and Gerald Cleaver and Drew Grass, and that's how I met those guys through Binney. Actually, he was really important, and then I went then to New York every year for the next 15 years for a month or 2 months, either during the summer or the winter to play or record and once you play with those guys, then somehow the network slowly gets wider. I really wanted to play with Tim Byrne, and since I played with Tom Rainey, they're really tight. That was in a way easier to make, and yeah, all these connections then somehow started to unfold. By playing with David Binney, it was easy to play with Donnie McCaslin also because they know each other. And
Sure.
so,
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
the connections that we know about. So that begs the question. You also make records with Europeans. I imagine Slovakian,
Slovenian.
Slovenian,
Slovenian. Yeah. Yeah.
right? No, Slovak is Czechoslovakia, right?
Yeah.
Slovenian musicians. W- Do you feel a difference when you're playing with with New York musicians as opposed to Slovenian musicians?
I mean, I play mostly European also, like lots of Germans and Italians and French and British and Scandinavian. But maybe this difference was bigger 20 years ago. But now, no, because like so many of these guys who we play or I play with, or from Berlin or Germany or wherever, many of them studied in the States. So, and they're following the current scene. So everyone plays amazing. It's just like nowadays, you play with a drummer from Berlin, like, I don't know, Christian Lillinger or someone, and it's just like, it's as good as not, it's hard to compare, but everyone is so good nowadays. No, many Americans also are living now in Europe, so many musicians are moving from New York to Europe. So I think the borders are way smaller than they used to be. So
Yeah, I mean it's true. It's different now than it was. It's
yeah,
because everybody has access to the same information, kind of.
exactly.
We can
Yeah.
all study the same. I mean, but I remember I lived in San Francisco for 12 years, and there were some good players there. But I'll never forget. It might have been the first week I got back. I went down to the 55 bar and saw Mike Stern and
Oh
Ben.
man, sure. Mike's, yeah.
Yeah, and Ben Porowski is playing drums, and like I think in the middle of the first tune, Ben Porowski takes a drum solo and just tears the entire place down on with an energy that just didn't exist out in San Francisco. It's just there's something
Yeah,
talking about
that's,
Julian Lodge. There's that New York
yeah.
edge that kind of seems to be something. But in terms of talent and I mean and musicality and all that kind of stuff, that hasn't. I mean, Europe has been it had that for years. It's not
Yeah. It's just like you say, the amount of musicians in New York, you have like, I don't know, 160 first call modern jazz drummers in New York. So each one of them will nail it and kill the whatever music you give them. It'll be just like incredible, right? Maybe the numbers are less in Europe. There are amazing players still, but just the amount of these players in New York is just
right.
incredible on every instrument. I mean, still.
It just falls. Yeah, the pool falls off a little quicker than in other places.
Yeah,
You can still
yeah.
find people just as good. It's funny. I just watched your Nguyen
Oh yeah.
interview because I love him,
Oh man, me too. Yeah.
I that sent me down a rabbit hole. And there's a concert. You see that concert from September with the quartet? It was just a
Oh yeah, with Chris Jennings, yeah, and those guys, yeah.
yeah, and the drummers from America, from New York, I guess, and so yeah, it was a real
Yeah.
international crew, which I mean, I'm loving that about modern music. So I noticed you have a record called, is it K or Kai's Secret?
K Secret, yeah.
Kai's Secret. You don't have that on your website for some reason, and I was wondering if there's this. It's on.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's on Spotify, but I didn't find it on your.
On Bandcamp, you mean, or?
No, on your website.
Oh, it should be.
In
Really?
the
Oh man.
I may have missed it, but I was just curious if there was a secret. And who is Kay? Because Kai, you use that name in some of your compositions and titles of your records.
Oh, it's my ex-wife now. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I used to call her. I mean, sometimes it's still okay. So it was. We needed a title sometimes, so I was just like, oh, okay, that's it.
All right. So the free sessions with the, what do you call it? The Frequestra.
Mm-hmm.
You have 11 musicians on there, and what about 3 guitar players or something like that? 2 drummers. I'm always curious, is there a path or a method you use to keep that in, in a musical direction? I mean, anything like a Butch Morris type conduction or?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote like a sketch, a map, let's call it a map, which was kind of, we start with a duo, let's say saxophones, you join in, we go there. But what happens, it's up to the moment. But it was a certain sketch, yeah, like that it's not everyone all the time playing, but it's okay, we need a quartet here, then stuff like that. There's a roadmap, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that helps. But also,
Yeah.
if you have the right musicians, like what's that guitar orchestra? The percussionist has I'm spacing the name right now.
Oh,
But
Adam Rudolph.
yeah, Adam Rudolph. He
Yeah.
put out a couple of those records, and you listen to those, and you just go, "This is amazing." I mean, he's got what 12 or something guitar players, or eight or
Yeah.
nine guitar players on every track, and it's so
Yeah.
musical, and so there's so much space. And
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, he has like amazing guys there, but it's doable. I have a guitar orchestra here in my hometown from students, and it's 33 musicians, 27 guitarists actually. So, but I kind of divided it like in an orchestra, like violins one, violins two, violas. So that's how I wrote the music. So it's like 5 guitars playing one line, and so then it makes sense. Otherwise, it could be chaotic. Yeah.
oh, good. I mean, it can sound great. Do you know Tim Brady's work with
Oh, sure.
100 or
I
200?
used to play with Tim in Maribor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where?
Oh, here in my hometown, back in 1997, 6. Yeah. We used to play a couple of duets actually in Maribor. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went up to Montreal to see. I don't remember if it was 100 or 200 that he had
Yeah.
for that one. And
It's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah.
yeah, and he makes it work. I mean, and they're, most of them are amateurs. It's just the way he writes the stuff and
Yeah.
works with it. It works. It can definitely work. But yeah, this is leading me towards a couple of things. I mean, you have those great records, Not Quite Alone records with you, and what is it?
Oh, Szilárd Meze,
36 different guitar players over the course of 3
Oh
records.
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you find them all and get them to play on something like that? I mean, it seems like a perfect COVID project where you could exchange files, but do you
Yeah.
actually know all those guys?
Like 70% of those. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like when this COVID happened, we all needed some challenges, and that was one of the ideas. I think the last 2 years have been really productive. In my case, it didn't bother me. I mean, the gigs were gone more or less, but I really stayed creative, which is important for the mind and the chops and playing. And yeah, just like some guys I knew, but like when finding a guitarist from Malta, that was a quest, for instance, or to figure out who's, I don't know, in some more unknown countries. I didn't know it, so then I just Googled, and I was like, man, he's from Malta, Sandro Zarafa in this case, who I know, of course, but I didn't know he's from Malta, and stuff like that. It happened. So, or a Romanian jazz guitarist, I didn't know anyone, so then I just Googled, and yeah, well, it was a fun project. It's beautiful.
So you were purposely seeking out musicians from as many countries, different countries as possible?
Yeah, it's basically the idea is to involve all European countries. It's just musicians, guitarists from every European country actually involved. So that was the idea. Then I first wanted to make only this, like you said, small COVID idea of playing, doing compositions. And then my girlfriend said well, why don't you expand that? I was like, well, I mean, well, you could do like every, European country. I was like, well, that sounds like a good idea. So, grew out of proportion. So, but it was fun. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing because of what are there, 36
yeah.
guitarists. Of those 36 guitarists, what did I write down? I've never heard of all but 6 of them. So the 30 of them I never heard of. And
yeah, incredible.
And I've been doing this site for, I've been writing for Guitar Player and Premier Guitar and Guitar One, and doing this site for this site alone for 11, 12 years at this point. And I spent way too much time on YouTube and, go down the guitar rabbit hole all the time. And still, there's 30 guitar players that I never heard of. And it's been amazing. And, but do you ever find it a little daunting that there's this many great guitar players in the world?
I think it's like any instrument, right? It's like sometimes you just check, but let's say guitarists, all of these guys are band leaders. And all of these guys have recorded albums, and maybe they're not so known internationally, but still, they're. And then you check out some of the records these guys did, and it's like with many famous musicians also are on their records as sideman, and you're like, man, Then you go to their website and you see like, wow, this guy has done, I don't know, 7 records, and I haven't heard of them. And then you listen to them, it sounds amazing, and it's like, man, And then you check the saxophone player on that record, and he's, it's just like the amount of good music out there. It's just, it's scary actually.
Well, it is scary. Do you think part of it is a function of the last 10 years of so many people going to music schools?
That's also, that would lead me then, what I speak to many, in these interviews I do, to a question which I actually agreed, that many of them, especially guitarists, sound alike. So that's the problem of finding a voice. Let's say a generation of my age or a little bit younger, everyone sounded like, even many guys who are known now, sounded like Kurt Rosenwinkel for a certain time, with this delay-ish kind of vibe going on. And which sucks, this is the problem of the academic system, because every year they produce thousands of guitarists following kind of the same program, and maybe only one of them will find the original voice. So that's quite a problem, I think, nowadays. Many older guitarists also expose this as problem, as an issue, let's put it like that.
It's most definitely an issue. It's partly, of course, partly I blame the music schools, but, it's fascinating that the golden age, what I would consider the golden age of modern guitar, John Scofield, John Abercrombie, Bill Frisell, Mike Stern, all went to Berkeley at roughly around the same time and all studied, with the same people around, yet they still don't sound anything alike. And exactly. I think part of it, it's a societal thing that people want instant gratification, and they want instant adulation and stuff, and they're given that by, oh wow, he sounds just like Charlie Parker, or oh wow, he can play just like George Benson, or he can play just like this guy, and then everybody goes, oh, isn't that great? But I'm sure you know this, back in the day, if you got on a stand when Charlie Parker was around and you sounded like Charlie Parker, they threw your ass off. It's like, we don't need another Charlie Parker. Go home and get your own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't think that happens nearly enough anymore.
Man, it's like you mentioned YouTube. You have all these incredible YouTube guitarists who, transcribe a solo, like you said, by George Benson, and they play it note per note. Or it's even worse if you go, to more like John Petrucci style, and this heavier rock stuff, or Guthrie Govan or Steve Vai, and they nail it. But they don't have a record out, they don't tour, they don't do anything. But then they have millions of views because people just want to see that. And sometimes it's just like, man, that's so not important, actually. It's like, really.
Well, you would know this better than I would. In the actual world of players, is there any, is it considered okay to sound like somebody else? If you walked into a session with, with Tom Rainey and, and those guys, and sounded exactly like Bill Frisell, they would not be impressed.
No, I remember my first experience in New York was in 2004. I did a record with Tom Rainey, Mark Elias, and Tony Malaby. And those guys have been playing together for 20 years. And we are on a we were like on Mark Elias's apartment behind a table, you know, just acoustically going through the tunes, and we play. Tom is playing on pots and you know stuff just to go through the heads, and Elias is like, man, you sound different. Did you study jazz? And I was like, no, I didn't. Yeah, that's good, you know. He's heard something that wasn't cliche like, because I didn't study jazz, so that was a good sign. I thought, I was like, okay, cool, check. That's I'm on the right path, I hope, you know. So yeah, I think finding your own voice, that's the problem of the younger generation. It's, you know, even many established cats of my generation or younger, I wouldn't recognize them, like you said, you know. And then Frisell plays a G chord, and even if it's something simple, you would be like, shit, that's Bill Frisell. And then I do the same chord, but it doesn't sound the same. It's just like, you know, or Schofield, when he played, I remember jamming with Schofield, and he played on this shitty $60 guitar, acoustic one, and he sounded exactly the same as on his Ibanez back then, you know, exactly the same phrasing. So it's all in the fingers. And yeah,
It is, but it is something. I mean, it's not necessarily there from birth, because
yeah.
you remember that Schofield Abercrombie record,
Oh yeah, Solar. Yeah.
Solar, yeah. And I saw them play together in a club at that time. You
Oh
know,
man, really? Oh
when they were,
wow.
yeah, it was just a little
Oof.
club on Bleecker Street. And but if you listen to that record, Schofield doesn't sound as much like Schofield as he does now.
True.
You know.
True.
So at some
True.
point, I got to get him on this and interview him about that and see, because a lot of guys can't articulate it. You know, how to. I mean, Bill. I feel like Bill always sounded like Bill.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even that first live Arnold Anderson
Yeah.
concert.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
but and I saw him with Stone Tiger with Percy Jones. That's how I discovered him. I walked in and went, "What planet did this guy come on?"
Exactly.
But there had to be a time back when he was a bebop snob in Denver, which he's spoken about, where he didn't sound as much like Bill Frisell as he does now. And
Yeah.
it's that transition that I'm really curious about, is how people get from here to there. How do they, you know, is it a process of uh, erosion? Is it a process of pulling out
Good
away,
question.
or
Yeah.
a process of adding? I mean, I saw Matheny with Gary Burton, you know, I mean, in at the Village Gate, was it? Yeah, in like the
Oh
70s.
yeah. Yeah.
I almost quit guitar on the spot. You know, I mean, it was like how old could he have been? 19 or something? But he sounded like Matheny. He already
Yeah.
sounded like Matheny.
He said, yeah. Yeah.
But he had already put in how many years? Like 5, 7 years in Kansas City, you know, and who knows what he sounded like when he first started, you know, but he rapidly got to that point where,
The sound. Yeah.
yeah, he had that sound. And I think it's in all of us. That's the thing. I think you have to work to not sound like yourself. You have to work hard to not sound like yourself.
That's a good question. Yeah. I think through time, I guess it's like I see it as a, you know, like when they dig diamonds and then they have to like clean it, and I think that's the sound. You just somehow have to get rid of all the stuff, and I guess you find it then.
Well, how did it work for you? I mean, you were transcribing solos from all your
Yeah.
heroes early on. How did you end up putting them together in a way that doesn't sound like? Because we've also heard those guys who, you know, they don't sound like one guy,
Yeah.
but what's the joke? Coltrane lick, diminished scale Parker lick, Coltrane lick, diminished scale Parker lick.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like they sound like an amalgam, but it doesn't hold together. But I mean, when I listen to you, you don't sound like an amalgam of anything. Or I can't pick out the individual parts. I'm sure you can hear them, but you know, because I know where I got every lick I ever, you know, I play, or everything I ever did. But other people don't hear that, you know, necessarily, and I don't hear it in your playing. So how did you put that all together?
Yeah, I think it's still a work in progress. You know, I still practice a lot, and mm, you know, that's why I sometimes ask musicians what to do when you're stuck and how, and everyone actually, you know, has the same answer, you know, even, you know, Bobby Broom, if he's still practicing, or he's stuck sometimes, or whatever genre is we're talking about. But I don't know, I just figure out what I liked. You know, I saw that I will never play like George Benson or Jimmy Rainey or Barney Castle. I mean, also stylistically, it's just not my cup of tea. I just don't. I love to listen to it, but not to play it. I don't hear it. So, you know, like Pasquale Grasso or someone like that were amazing, but I just can't play like that. Actually, it's not my technique. Also, I use more legato, and that's why I loved Abercrombie, for instance. You know, and I loved saxophone players because how to make a long line, make it sound fluid. And yeah, so somehow I guess just by listening to a lot of saxophone players and all these guys, and basically in the beginning also not being able to play stuff. It's also simple as that, you know. I would see like a solo by, I don't know, like some of the old cats, Benson and or Barney Castle, and it's just like it was impossible to get the speed. Or Pat Martino, let's say, who's a typical, you know, picker. I couldn't do it, you know, like Sonny. Now I can actually play it. I mean, when I teach, you know, I give them Blue Bossa and I play it first, and I couldn't play that 20 years ago. And that's how I guess.
It's like Miles said, you know, he said, I don't hear that fast.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's just like, I don't know. I remember Schofield told me, like, one of the first lessons, think like a saxophone player. And it's stuck with me ever since, you know. It's like the length of a phrase should be.
Well, it's breathing.
Much,
that's the thing.
yeah.
Like guitar players don't have to breathe, and sometimes
Exactly.
they don't. And and I don't think they realize that for a listener,
Yeah.
there's something subliminal about that. When you start hearing lines that go longer than a human breath, it just
Yeah.
you kind of tune out, or it feels weird, or it doesn't sound right. And that's why, I mean, I've heard some guitarists suggest, you know, take a breath, play a phrase,
Yeah.
breath,
Yeah.
play another phrase.
I think that's so important. I mean, just and you know, always when I became a band leader, it was I realized that's how I am. What a person I am. It's just like, for me, it was always about the music when making records. So even if there was like 10 tunes, compositions that I wrote, maybe I had only 3 guitar solos, like guitar solos as, you know, head solo, head, and for me, it was always more important to have this general picture of an album. And, you know, if you have like, I don't know, Tony Malaby or Mark Elias with you, or Donnie McCaslin or David Binney, you know, I mean, those are, what can I do better than they can? I mean, I rather have, the music will be way better if, you know, Donnie solos, I mean, if, than me, you know, he will probably contribute much more. And maybe in some other tune, I'll do something where I'm better, or, you know, stuff like that. So I quickly learned that, you know, from guys like Frisell. He's one of those egoless people who also, it doesn't matter whether you have a guitar solo or not, or Abercrombie or all these guys. It's just like about the music. That's the idea I get when I listen to them or talk to them. Or
Well, it
yeah.
also seems like I mean, you are obviously an incredibly prolific composer, and you're very into composition. Also,
Yeah.
I makes me wonder, did you ever have to go out and make a living playing guitar?
Yeah. I mean, when I started, you know, I always had this. Well, when I was a student studying languages, I had like a brunch gig every Saturday and Sunday, and did weddings, but it didn't last a long time. I earned really good money, but I just told the guy, I cannot do that. You know, it's just, it was like selling out, and then I rather did other stuff than sacrificing music. I always tried to play only the music I wanted to play. So it, you know, I early started working as a translator to make a living, and teaching basically. So I love teaching guitar. You know, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I just really love it. It's my passion, you know. It's, and I'd rather do that than to play,
Well,
wedding.
I think that definitely helps because I mean, I once did I don't know if it was a wedding or some function with a guitar with a piano player, and we did take the A train. And he said, if I never have to play this again, it'll be too soon. And I'm thinking, Duke Ellington played this every night of his life. You know, it's a great tune.
Yeah,
But if this is the kind of work that makes you bored doing this, you know, because maybe you're not playing with great musicians who can bring it somewhere. It's like when I saw Robin Ford play Proud Mary, I think with Etta James on that old Dave Sanborn show, you know, and I'm going, I mean, I literally, well, no, it's Mustang Sally. On the back of one of my guitars, I have a Euro slash through Mustang Sally. Like I don't ever
okay.
want to play it again. And Proud Mary was one of those tunes. But I heard the way he voiced it and the way he played it, and I go, if you know, if you can't bring something new to anything, I mean, how many times did Jim Hall record Skylark? You know, it's like,
Exactly.
I mean, that's a
Yeah.
great tune, but still, you know,
Yeah.
the same tunes for many years. It's all about that creativity. On the other hand, if you, like you say, if you're doing the kind of jobs that are making you hate musical jobs that are making you hate music, I mean, I
Then
felt
yeah.
the same way when I moved back to New York. I was started doing some club dates, you know, as they call them there. It's funny, they call them club dates in New York and they call them casuals in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And they are neither casual nor are they played in clubs.
Yeah.
But I did some club dates and one was actually great. We were playing, you know, jazz, and I'm not a jazz player, but the guy kept throwing me solos and, you know, it was very encouraging. I thought, this is nice, except, you know, it was $250 to drive like 5 hours out to Pennsylvania and in the heat in a tuxedo and you know, I just never wanted to do anything that would make me hate music, you know,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
always willing to do other jobs if that's what it took. And I think Bill cleaned apartments for a while
Yeah.
in New York, and some people do it, and some people, on the other hand, and I'm sure you know people like this too, have been able to just play anything and everything all the time, and it
Yeah.
hasn't affected them. But it's whatever you need to keep yourself creative. I was going to ask you, you know, with 30, it was interesting with 36 players on those three records. It was interesting. I believe there's only one woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm wondering how that happened, or are there still, you know, there are more and more women
Yeah.
playing, obviously, like Mary Halvorson and, you know, Jessica Ackerley and you know, and there's just some great players, Cheryl
Yeah.
Bailey in New York. So, but was it just a, you know, random that you just didn't find anybody or weren't?
Yeah. I mean, in Europe, actually, no, there aren't so many. I mean, that would be like, you know, that I knew, and there aren't really so many like recording artists in this sense. You know, in the States it's different. Like you said, you know, Mary Halvorson and the older, you know, Cheryl Bailey and Emily Remler was there, of course, and you know, Ava Mendoza, she's incredible now, and
Yeah, she's terrific.
incredible players. But in Europe, actually, no, I couldn't find any. I wanted to, you know, not. It's a different energy, of course, but it's just I couldn't find anyone. Yeah.
I always claim it's because they're too smart to take up guitar. It's like, I mean,
Yeah, to play jazz and
there's
leave
too
it.
many guitar players, so they all take up, you know, bass. There's a lot of great bass players,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
I mean, look at you know, all these amazing bass players and keyboard players,
yeah,
and drummers, but no, they look at guitar and they go, nah, I'm not gonna do
yeah.
that.
It's a funny thing. Yeah, maybe I don't know.
So in on those records, I'm you know I'm concentrating on those three duo records because they're such great guitar records, and I respect. Did you do anything, or on the Frequestra record also? Do you do anything to help differentiate the sound of, you know, the different guitars, and so it becomes clear because you're in the same frequency range and, you know, things like that to help separate them so you can hear who's playing what?
Uh, I mean, yeah, they already have a different sound per se, you know, so it's gonna that helps. Someone likes a more twangy sound, someone more darker, so that helps, I guess, just by the sound. I think that's the clearest.
So how did you record? How did you lay it down? Actually, if you were doing it, I assume you were doing them all remotely.
Yeah, it happened like actually I wrote many tunes for this guitar duo project just with some players in mind, so I knew, let's say, Andre Fernandez from Portugal, who's an incredible player, and how he plays. And then I wrote a tune with him in mind, or Mikael Plug we played before already with Mikael from Denmark, and we share some of the same musicians we recorded and played with. And I really know how he plays since we already did gigs together. And then I wrote a tune for him like that. So then I usually wrote ahead and the harmony and the melody, and I recorded maybe just the chords or the basses, and then I sent it to the guy, and the other guitarist then recorded the melody, and then maybe I sometimes re-recorded my accompanying to his melody so that it kind of felt more alive. And that's how we kind of did then this, vice versa. So then in the end, you actually listen to a track, and I think in most cases, it sounds really organic just because of that, because we were a little bit, especially me, those guys usually recorded, and then I played on their material around it and took out stuff and maybe reorchestrated what I played a little, or revoiced or stuff like that. So to make it sound, more as if we're playing in the same room, kind of that was the idea.
And it does. I mean, and I've been amazed through the last 2 years of so many records that I've received,
Yeah.
of people recording like that, and how natural. I mean, the last McLaughlin record, that's mind-boggling. I ran out of time with him. I really wanted to ask him about how did you do that? It sounds like the four of you were playing in one room.
It's a remote one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's remote.
Oh man, I have to check it out. Okay, once again.
I'm
Okay,
pretty sure he did remote, and it's mind-boggling, but we got so busy talking about that, Dennis Chambers and Joey DeFrancisco gig, and that Mustang that I saw the picture of him playing. He was playing a Mustang with John McLaughlin. Before I know it, the hour's up, and he's not one who can hang much longer.
Sure.
But yeah, it's amazing what people can do in terms of remote recording. And I think it helps what you did, which is to have them play and then redo what you did. And
yeah, I think
and to
so
a certain
important.
extent, I've always felt that. It's like when people say, oh, there's nothing like musicians playing in the same room. Well, yeah, for jazz, that's great. And, for pop music, it's kind of like if you get 4 or 5 musicians that have never played before together in the same room and playing, that's not much better than having them overdub
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
end. So you can make overdub sound like, I've produced records like that where you can make it sound like everybody's playing in the same room.
yeah,
But still, it's been amazing to hear how many records do like yours sound, and you're not thinking that somebody was overdubbing this. You're thinking this sounds like two
yeah.
people playing together. Um, Before we moved to the Eric Dolphy project, looking through YouTube videos, you sent me down a rabbit hole of checking out all these guitar players. So I'm putting together a Guitar Moderne festival, with full concerts by some of these guys. I was
That's
amazed.
amazing. Super.
Yeah, well, people should know about them. That's the whole point of the website.
Yeah,
But you and a bunch of them are all playing Telecasters, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on why so many jazz musicians gravitate towards Telecasters. I mean, Bill admits he has a problem, like an addiction, but it seems like so many guys move to that guitar, and I'm curious why you think that might be.
well, I started playing Natala only since half a year, like 6 months ago.
Were you playing the
And
Ibanez up until then?
yeah, yeah. And I don't know, it's just like the first time I grabbed it, I started playing differently, just completely different. I'm way more fluid on it. I don't know why, but I can play faster, and somehow I can play less also. It makes sense. You know, I don't know. So it triggers out something that maybe playing that Ibanez for 20 years or 25 years. I don't know if I got to the end of it, what I can do at least on that guitar. And now this suddenly feels so different. The neck, you know, I played way differently than on that one. I mean, it's still me. I still play how I play, but like something, it triggers something different. I don't know what it is actually, but just the neck or the shape or the length of the neck. I don't know. Hard to put into
Yeah,
words. But,
that's true. It would be a different scale length. Are you using the same gauge strings?
uh, no, I'm using tens. On that one, I use 11. So maybe that's also a different thing. You know, I don't know, no idea. But it's just like always when I play it, it's like, man, what is this? You know, it's completely different mindset. It's quite weird actually.
Well, if you haven't had many guitars over the years, then you're probably not aware that, yeah, every guitar can bring different stuff out of you. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, I have not that many, but I have multiple guitars, and they're all different. I mean, I have two Strats, but you know, but that's one because one is my 64, and I don't want to take it out anywhere. But everything else is different, and everyone I pick up makes me want to play something
yeah,
different. It just does that. I mean, I've been toying with a theory about Telecasters because I know for myself, I started on acoustic guitar, and I think if jazz guitar players started on an arch top or something like that, there's something about that squared off non-cut thing that feels more
yeah.
natural than a Stratocaster with the belly
Maybe.
cut and stuff like that. But I don't know if that's it. I was just curious. So let's talk about the Dolphy record. I think you said you were influenced by the Miles Ozaki Monk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, I started. I talked with Miles during this Dr. Jazz Talk series, and you know, we talked a lot about this Monk record and how he approached it, and it's just, you know, what he said really blew my mind because the solo guitar heritage is so much influenced by, you know, this. At least I was up to last year when I did the Dolphy project. Then I was like, man, shit, I don't have to do that. But like, you know, by Virtuoso or by Joe Pass or, you know, Ben Munder or all these amazing guys who play like that, you have to like play incredible voicings and you have to Joe Pass harmonized almost, you know, every note and that slow run and then again a heavy chord. And when he improvised, it was a lot of chordal stuff in between. And then Miles said, like, well, you know, I was thinking when he did the Monk record, why can Steve Lacy, let's say, or Dave Liebman do a solo saxophone record and not be burdened by the idea that they cannot play harmony, of course. So they can just improvise on the form or just really improvise. And that really blew my mind because then I was like liberated in a way. Okay, I can play solo guitar. Of course, on some tunes I reharmonized and did a lot of chords and intervals and voicings, but on some tunes I just played single lines, and that really helped the way of thinking. You know, I don't have to constantly comp myself and play a bass line or play a chord in between. I can just think like a saxophone player, which was really like, okay, that's easy. That's, you know. But
Well,
there's not Joe Pass or Ben Munder sitting there like
well, but I mean, there is the fact, you know, I mean, Frisell reimagined how you can do solo
yeah,
guitar stuff, and that's really, I mean, because I was frankly never able to listen to solo guitar records because
yeah, me neither.
I just it never sounded complete. There, it's not a piano. No matter if
Yeah,
even if you're Joe Pass, when you're dropping out to do your solo thing, then the chords go away. Especially if you've been playing chords, then you start missing them. But what I'm finding, like in Miles' record, well, first of all, let me ask you, why did you decide to do acoustic as opposed to electric for solo?
I don't know. You know, when this first lockdown happened, I just have my acoustic guitar on a, you know, stand on my wall, and I did online teaching basically, so I was at home all the time, and between the student, or even I was teaching all the time on the acoustic, and even when I wasn't teaching, I just grabbed it on the couch. My girlfriend was reading or something, and I just like, oh, okay, I'll noodle a little bit, 15 minutes, and I fell more and more in love with it. I did a couple of acoustic records before the lockdown, and I just started loving it more and more, and now I play a lot of acoustic, and just the sound of it, I fell in love again with the basics also, just to play a G chord. It's beautiful, it's so beautiful. And it's like what you said with Frisell, he plays a E minor chord, and it sounds like the best thing there is, and it's just two fingers. And I just started noodling around more and more, and I love the idea of not dragging the entire amplifier and all the pedals there and to play music. It was just so simple, and it felt so organic actually to do it. So
well, yeah, one thing, I mean, if you're going to do that and you're going to do the single line thing, I think it's really important that the sound be really good,
yeah.
and that your acoustic, what kind of acoustic guitar is it?
Oh, it's like a handmade, custom-made Zaletel guitar. It's a really amazing luthier from Slovenia, who's basically making guitars like for all the big names now. Like for Lionel Lueke, he has his guitar, the 7-string. It's made by this guy, and it's like 23 years old. And this guy's father made it, and it's getting better and better. Like when I bought it 22 years ago, or when it was made actually for me, the guy was like, well, through time it will age, and it will age well, because the wood was really amazing wood. And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, I guess, and it's true, from month to month, it's just it's incredible. It's the sound of it. It's just gaining more sustain and more sound. And it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you recorded it beautifully too. Did you record it, or did you go to a studio?
No, I recorded at my living room. Just set up two condensed microphones, and that was it. And that's why sometimes, when I played it, like my cats in two songs, two compositions, I like, play, I don't know, end note, and then my cat goes like, well, and I'm like, man, and I couldn't edit it out because it was like the perfect take, and I was like, okay, I'll leave it on. It's
Somehow I think Eric would approve. I'm not.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So is the ambience just the room, or did you add any reverb or anything to it?
I just added a tiny bit of reverb, but the room, like the living room, has a really nice acoustic, and there was no need to do anything. I didn't EQ it actually at all. There's no EQing. It's just like on one mic, because there was two, I set up a little bit of reverb, and that was it. It's really natural, and I'm surprised because people now, the reactions are really good to this album, and a lot of people bought it already and downloaded it, and everyone says the sound is really good, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's cool. It's just
well, yeah, it definitely is. So did you, Mike, do the classic mic, put one mic closer to the fretboard and one mic down by
yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay. And it's just also the guitar, like I said, the sustain is really, really good. It sounded so incredible already, but playing one note, I was like, man, that sounds so good. That's why I kind of fell in love with the acoustic again. Just that you can actually play one note and it sounds beautiful. You don't have to do a lot of stuff on it. So
yeah, it does sound great. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but you started doing these YouTube interviews, maybe a year ago or something?
Yeah, March 2020.
Yeah, so I mean March 21, so maybe a year and a half. But you have 150 interviews up there. I feel like such a slacker. How did you do that?
Oh, it's like I've done now 201 already, but they haven't been published yet. Man, it's become an obsession actually, because I just love doing it. So I usually do it on the weekends or something like that, and it's just there are so many great musicians out there. I want to hear their stories, and like you said, I would love to talk to John McLaughlin also, but first of all, I don't think he would do this. It's hard to get to him or someone like that, you know, like really huge stars. And that's one thing. And on the other thing, there are so many musicians who make the music of John McLaughlin or any of these guys sound really good. And these are the people the majority maybe doesn't know, you know, like bass players and drummers and who have done like hundreds of records. And I love hearing their stories, how they did it. And you know, that's why the list is just endless. When I see the musicians, I still want to do the talks with not even writing down the big names like Julian Lage or John McLaughlin or whoever, who I would love to talk to these guys, of course, but like already the list of not so well-known guys is just like, you know, easily it goes to 800 or 900. So
Oh yeah. Well, there's way more of those than there are of the big names. I mean,
yeah.
it's I think you're probably getting what we might call the COVID bump, which I did too. Because of COVID, you know, all these guys are locked down, so it's a lot easier to get a hold of them. And it's funny. I mean, I think you're getting better known about it, and it's not impossible. You could get a hold of someone like McLaughlin. I mean, I was amazed that he was going to do it. You know, Guitar Moderne is not exactly premier guitar, but because I write for Guitar Player and Premier Guitar, I'm on the
Sure.
publicist list for the records. And when I contacted them, you know, about doing it, they said sure. And you know, I mean, somebody like Andy Summers is, you
Oh,
know,
wow, beautiful.
yeah, I got to do him. Well, I had interviewed him before for that. I forgot what it was, the something dog record. I mean, that really out record he did a couple of records ago, which was great. And he agreed to do it. And you know, I mean, these people are more accessible than they were. But
Yeah, that's true. True.
I understand what you're doing because, you know, I mean, we grew up the same, you know, reading the liner notes. Basically, I grew up reading liner notes back when there were albums,
Yeah.
liner notes, and I wanted to know who all these people were and what they did. And it's great that you're bringing them to the fore. And by not concentrating on guitar players, of course, you have an
Yeah.
opportunity to expand your pool and your audience, you know. But I'm also, you know, quite impressed. You know, you really know these people's work, and you know, you're obviously, and your enthusiasm comes through. So it's
Yeah.
it's great to see. Yeah, and it's fun to do. Look, we're all locked down in COVID. It's nice to be able to,
Oh man, I love it.
you
But it's
know,
sometimes scary, you know, like let's say when I did the Frisell one, it's just too much, you know, or someone like that, you know, because the amount of work these people have done, you know, what do we focus on? You know, it's like I could talk about, you know, early Frisell stuff for hours or listen to him, or so it's kind of hard to narrow it down. Like you said, McLaughlin, you know, he's done. It's just the periods he went through and the stuff, you know, it's just overwhelming sometimes of these guys. It's just like, man, you know,
hey, I
incredible.
had that problem with you. I mean, you have a, you know, you have a pretty big body of work, but, and I'll just tell you how I approach it is, you know, because
Oh,
there's a
please.
limited amount of time, is just, I go by what most interests me about them
Yeah,
and, you know, the work that they've done just like I was saying, I talked to McLaughlin about that Dennis Chambers, you know, well, it started off as the Elvin Jones but the Joey DeFrancisco trio, because I mean, just personally, I was never a big Mahavishnu fan. You know, I
yeah, me neither. Yeah.
I was not a
Yeah.
fan of his guitar sound, you know, because I was coming up with Jeff Beck and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, and I just didn't think his sound, you know, didn't move me. And for me, it all starts with the sound. But the sound he had on that After the Rain record with the arch top and
Yeah.
the ring modulator and that sound, I go, wow, I love this sound, and it spoke to me. So, you know, that's what I focus on, and you know, it's good for you too. That's, we're talking about having your voice as an interviewer. You know, that's where you get your voice as an interviewer as well, as you
Yeah.
know, because that's, otherwise you're going to sound like every other interviewer, and you're going to
Sure.
ask them the same questions as every other interviewer, and you know, they're bored to death answering.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's like you know, I did with Paul Ballenbeck, you know, Paul
Yeah,
Rush,
sure.
and you know, we were talking, and it's a really nice talk, and then his story with Joe Pass, and he was like, yeah, man, you know, I told that like 176 times. I was like, yeah, sure, let's not go there even, you know, like everyone wants to hear like the interviewer that story, but I exactly agree with what you're saying because like with some of the big guys, you know, they're like hundreds of interviews, and then they keep repeating that same one story, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, yeah. It's like the
again,
Bobby Broom story about the club owner. I'm sure he's told that one a couple of times.
yeah, sure,
But but he
yeah,
seems to love telling it, so that's fine. I mean,
yeah,
but it's now that we're talking, it's really hitting me. It is very similar to developing your voice on the instrument. And as I was talking about, that thing, because I've actually heard people, guitar players, diss Pat Metheny or John Scofield by saying, "Oh, they play the same licks all the time." And my
yeah,
answer is, yeah, because first of all, they invented those licks. They're not playing someone
exactly,
else's licks. Second of all, it's because those licks mean something to them. And that their relationship to those licks and their feeling that comes through those licks
yeah,
is what makes them exceptional. Not knowing every guitar lick that was ever invented and playing them all, then you just
yeah,
don't sound like anything. So I think it's the same thing for interviewing. If you follow your passion, which you are obviously doing, and talk about the stuff that interests you, you know
yeah.
they'll people respond and they love it. And I'm sure you've run into it more than once talking to people, of them saying, wow, first of all, you know what you're talking about, because they speak to so many people who don't,
Yeah, sure.
especially when they're flogging a product. And second of all, you're asking them stuff that they may have wanted to talk about that they can't. Well,
Yeah,
so I will look forward to the other 80 or so you have in the can or whatever it is. 'Cause,
it's coming. It's coming.
yeah, I'm a subscriber, and it's definitely a reason I wanted to do this. Aside from the fact that since you sent me that duo record, acoustic duo record you did last year, I guess, and I'm following your guitar playing, and it's definitely, I wanted to talk about that, but I also I thought it'd be a good opportunity to turn my readers on to your site, because
Yeah,
I may
thank
have done
you.
it already. I'm not sure, but it'd be great to do a post, and I'll embed a few of the interviews just so they
Oh,
can
super. Thank
right
you.
there, and hopefully. So are you working on anything now? Any new project?
Uh, let's see. Well, yeah, I mean, this Dolphy project is going to be featured on this year's jazz festival in Ljubljana. Like, it's a triple gig. I think Ava Mendoza is coming from New York to do her solo set, and probably Jeff Parker from Chicago to do his solo set, and me on my Dolphy. So it's going to be like three guitarists. So I have to practice now again Dolphy, because I recorded last year. That's why I'm doing now again. I got rusty in those songs. And then I have a tour coming up in October with my dream lineup. We did an album which is coming out in May with Arild Andersen on bass and Bob Moses, Bob Moses on drums.
Yeah.
So we have a tour. We have 12 gigs confirmed in October, like a European tour in Germany and Austria, Italy and Slovenia and Switzerland. So I'm looking forward to this year. Let's hope COVID permits it. I mean, that it's not canceled.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it's going over there. I mean, obviously Omicron is the big thing, and everybody's getting it, but apparently it isn't as bad. So,
Yeah,
so I mean, somebody posted something, some doctor was saying that, that it may create an immunity and it may taper off, and I'm hoping by March it's significantly tapered
yeah,
off, because Big Ears is in March, and that's going to be amazing. But I'm not going to go if it's still crazy. Uh,
yeah. We'll see. I mean, let's
well,
hope. Yeah.
you're rocking the Dolphy beard, I have to say. So that's
Well, have to do it. I have a gig, in June. So
yeah, yeah, it'll work. And it's been great talking to you. So
you too, Michael. Thanks so much for the time and everything. So
okay,
appreciate it.
take care of yourself.
You too. Ciao.